Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show for Tuesday. It is March the 11th, and I appreciate you being here. I've got kind of a different kind of show today. Something kind of hit me. It was just a clip that I saw yesterday. I was driving. I should have been paying attention to the road. I do this a lot now where I'm just constantly like in the cycle. Maybe you guys do the same thing. I'll have either X open or YouTube or whatever it is that's scanning videos to me. So I'm driving and I should be watching the road. And instead what I'm doing is listening and sort of glancing up at the corner where I keep my phone. It's a terrible habit and I should probably break it. But this one hit me. It's a gal who's talking about Christian nationalism. And I don't much care for the label. And I actually don't much care for the discussion until I started thinking about it more. And there's so many issues that keep happening because Americans have been lied to for most of my lifetime, probably starting sometime in the 90s. There's been this push to act like this country is not the country that it is. And then there's another push that has been meant to basically abuse and lie about the history of this country. And mostly it does the lying by not teaching people what our country's history is. And so as we continue onward, one of the most important things that we can do for our children, one of the most important things we can do for the generation that's coming up behind me is to make sure that they actually understand world history, American history, that they understand just a little bit about what it is that they have inherited as a nation, because I don't think people know. I don't think they do. And it's demonstrated every day in leftist media that they have not come to grips with a failed education system and what it means. And that by not knowing anything, I remember hearing this when I was a kid. You always say that those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. But it's not about understanding. They don't even know it. People don't even realize that they're wrong. And that's the other thing. It's this Ronald Reagan sort of quote that says it's not that the people on the political left don't know anything. It's that the things they know are not so. So we've got people that are out there espousing views that are based on false and inaccurate information to the point where they don't even understand who was on our team in World War II or how those events happened. And we are just now losing sort of the last of the folks that lived through the World War II era. And apparently we've completely forgotten about it to the point where you can talk about it on mainstream media and not even know that you're wrong, and so dramatically wrong that you appear to be a fool. So that's kind of what I wanted to get into today. And the topics are going to be interesting. COVID is number one, which is everywhere on all of the main media outlets. ABC, CBS, NBC, and MSNBC, every single one of those news outlets had a top line story above the fold talking about COVID. I don't know why. Maybe it's the 5-year retrospective, and maybe that's just what it was, a slow news day, but that they all had something about it. Discussions about removing people from the United States. It's a Donald Trump mistake on free speech, removing a dissident student from Columbia University. That's going to be something we got to get into. Again, principles. We have to understand principles. We have to be people that understand that America should mean something, and making it great shouldn't be at the cost of like short-term political wins and destroying the values. Discussion about the budget potential shutdown. Trump took a stab at Tom Massey. That's all terrible, bad idea. Revoking security clearances. That's really good. So we're going to go down there. And then a story that I saw in today's loop and yesterday's loop discussing a satanic black mass in Kansas and how on earth we've gotten to that point in 2025. I think it's actually a natural outgrowth from all of that. So that's where we're going. That's what I intend to discuss on today's program as you're listening. And thank you for joining us. If you're watching on Rumble, you can do so there. That's where our best live chat is, rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. We just broke 25,000 followers. If you're listening on YouTube or X, it's at Kyle Seraphin. Very easy to find and share. And then the locals community is kyleseraphin.com. If you want to subscribe, that's great. You also get our Sunday special earlier. And then lastly, on Spotify, if you don't like the pop-up ads anywhere else, in the replay, it is the best demographic information, so I find out who you all are, so we can actually get ads that make sense to you and what you're about, but more importantly, so we can kind of see who we're reaching and what performs and how it performs and so on, because I don't want to cover topics that are not interesting to you. All right. Speaking of advertisements, demographics, and things that pay the bills here, how about our friends over at Patriot Mobile? Speaking of values too, right? That's what they're discussing. It's patriotmobile.com/KSS. Won the election, but we are still in the fight to restore this great nation. Yeah, man, aren't we ever? We're only at the beginning of that, and now's a good time to take a stand with Patriot Mobile, who's leading the charge as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They offer a way to vote with your wallet. You don't have to compromise on quality or convenience. It's not about just providing cell phone service. It's a call to action to defend rights and freedoms, things we care about deeply here at this program. With Patriot Mobile, you're going to get outstanding nationwide coverage because they operate on all three of the major networks. And if you do currently have cell phone service today, you can get cell phone service with Patriot Mobile. They do have a coverage guarantee. They also have U.S. tech support. That's helpful. You can call them at 972-PATRIOT, or you can get to them at patriotmobile.com/KSS. At Patriot Mobile, the difference is every dollar you spend is going to support the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, actually all the Bill of Rights, because they care about these things. The sanctity of life, our veterans and first responders, it's very easy to switch. You can keep your number, you can ditch your number. Same thing with your cell phone. Upgrade or not, doesn't make a difference. Go right now to patriotmobile.com/KSS, and you're going to get 1 free month of service of the 12. You can sign up there, switch with them, give it a shot, defend freedom and our liberties with every single call and text that you make at patriotmobile.com/KSS. You guys do have a choice in these kind of things when you do it. All right, let's dive into some of this. This is going to be heavier than I thought it was going to be. So there's this podcast, I think it's called the Jubilee podcast. I have no idea why it's called Jubilee, and I don't understand the rules of it, but I see clips of it all the time, and they actually have some pretty good thought-provoking discussions. I've seen Michael Knowles step up and discuss things with transgender people and dominate the argument there, and you usually see the person sitting in the hot seat on the left as we look at the screen. That person usually is the hero of the show, and the debaters come in, and the debaters usually get roasted because there's a far better prepared host, guest, hero person. But that doesn't seem to be the case in this situation. And I actually probably should look at who this guy is that's making the argument. His name is Sam Sater, as far as I can tell. Let me look him up while we're talking about. An American actor. Well, that's why. And a left-leaning political commentator and media host. He includes a film called Who's the Caboose? Never heard of it. Yeah, no idea who this guy is. He made some arguments in this program, and I saw 2 of them. One of them was the woman that I'm going to show you second. The first one is going to be a discussion about the monarchy versus democracy. And you'll always notice, if you're going to find someone that agrees with what I think about this country, and what many of you most likely do as well, they don't call it a democracy. We don't call it that on purpose. This watering down of the language is a leftist tool. It continues to be the tool. How do we change definitions? How do we act like something is what it is not? One of the ways you do it is with language. Constant manipulation, constant barrage, an overwhelming marching out and repeating. And we saw this through the Democrat primary. We saw this, well, not the primary, through the Democratic attempt to push forward this Joe Biden character, our democracy, the soul of this country, all of this kind of stuff. They use religious type language. And yet they don't really hold any tenets of religiosity. They don't believe in a religion other than the secular religion of leftism, which is to worship the state and act like all good things come from government. If you're a Christian, if you're Jewish, if you are Muslim, you don't believe in that. You don't believe that good things come from the state. The state doesn't grant or create anything. But if you do live in that space, then you talk about my democracy, our shared values of democracy. And yet almost everything about the United States is not democratic. In fact, it's sort of elite. It's elitist. And the people who founded it were elitists. We just have to accept that. They were better educated. They had time for leisure. They had a lot of skin in the game. They were the ones who had the most money, that were going to be paying the most taxes. They were the most interested in resisting the British crown because the British crown threatened their ability to self-govern from all that distance. So being an elitist is kind of an American thing. And I guess I've always sort of had that instinct that the elite are not the enemy. Not if you understand what's going on, but the elite also have to have something more important. It's not just about having money. It's about having principles. It's about having values. And those values, and the most overwhelmingly important values, tend to be Christian and Western. And this is something the left actually used to know. If you were to get into it, and I do this frequently because I find it very interesting. I find it to be intellectually stimulating to talk to people that don't agree with me. Now, they don't always want to talk to me, mostly because they don't want to discuss it. But let's be really serious. If you're on the political left and you're a serious person, there are very few of them that are living out the transgender, anybody can be anything that they choose to be situation. Most of the people that are successful on the left, let's look at a Nancy Pelosi, who seems pretty disgusting to me. Nancy Pelosi, married to one person, doesn't seem to be confused about the fact that she's a female, right? Is a grandmother, tells us correctly that the values and things that she thinks are most important are about the children. Whether she actually lives that is another animal, but she knows what she needs to mouth in order to get regular people to listen. If you want to be successful in this country, I remember listening to Ben Shapiro, because this is the person that I listened to before COVID, before this thing popped up. I listened to Ben Shapiro regularly say that there's like basically three things you need to do. You need to get a job. You need to get married before you have kids. I think that may be the only two things. And yeah, you don't go into debt. There's a third one. Maybe one of you will remember it. But that was the thing I remember. And those are basic Western values, that you believe in monogamy and that you believe in responsibility, personal responsibility, that you follow through on those kind of things. The left used to actually totally get with that. In fact, I would make the argument to you that 1992 Bill Clinton would still be incredibly popular in conservative circles today. If he were to pop up, his positions that he held are very, very similar to Donald Trump's. So we're not running a right-wing, fascist, conservative regime with the Make America Great Again routine. In many ways, what you're looking at is 90s Democrat talking points. And they were not even remotely controversial. There was a reason. When you listen to guys like Scott Jennings, one of the first clips that I ever heard of Scott Jennings, who has a great piece that I'm going to play you in a minute, talking about how Michelle Obama is completely overrated. She's overrated because she's a radical, because she doesn't love this country. And as far as we can tell, her values don't actually align with almost anybody else. People think she's great, except when she went out there and threw her entire weight behind Kamala Harris and or Joe Biden, it didn't matter. She's not that effective because she's a radical. If she sat down the middle more, she might actually be really dangerous. But you have to love America and actually think America is a good place. And they don't do that. I've got some pretty interesting evidence, too, that we're going to play in a minute about that. I've got a graph of immigration for all the people that want to claim that America is racist and sexist and homophobic and xenophobic and all of that kind of stuff. You know what? I'll just show you right now. Here's the argument why the West is best. Let's start with a slide. I meant to go to COVID first, but we're going to start here. This is my last slide. Top destinations of international migrants. Again, controlling the narrative with the wording. But this is the international migrant community of 2020, measured in millions. Now, this graph is pretty small, so I'm going to translate it for you. If you're looking at a phone screen, you're not going to be able to see it. The number one destination for international migrants in the world is the United States of America. And it's not even close. It's not even close to close. We are 2 and change X higher than the next highest location that people head, and that's Germany. Then you have Saudi Arabia. There's actually two places that don't make a ton of sense to me. One of them is Saudi Arabia. The other one is United Arab Emirates. Those are in the top 10. And the reason I think that they are on there is that people go towards the more moderate versions of Islamic countries. So they find somewhere that has similar cultures to them, but is actually like a little more moderated version of it. But that's where they go. You see the top three, if you were going to remove the Muslim countries, is going to be the United States, Germany, Then, interestingly enough, the Russian Federation, who's seen a resurgence in sort of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And yeah, are they, under a dictator? They are. And yet people have chosen to go there because the alternative is worse. Then you've got the United Kingdom, France, Canada, Australia, Spain, Italy. And what you find in that top 10 in that entire list is that all of them are Western and Christian with the minor exceptions, right? One of them is Eastern and ostensibly sort of Christian. But the United States, with 51 million international immigrants, is the highest destination, and it dwarfs the others. In fact, you could add the next 5 below it. How interesting. Why would so many people come to this racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic place? Is it because of democracy? Or is it because that we have a republic and a melting pot where you get to come in? And what we've done and what we're ruining with what this current discussion is, this current push from the left, which has been going on for maybe 10 or 12 years that I've seen, at least that I've been aware of, where you've been saying America is not even a good place, let alone a great place. Why a slogan like Make America Great Again is even ringing true to people is simply because they haven't accepted, the left doesn't accept, that there is a dominant culture. And so I'm going to dissect it in 2 pieces. This guy wins the argument by basically waiting him out. The only thing I don't like about this clip is that we're seeing the young Latino man. He kind of like is really anxious, and I wish he was a little bit more calm because he does win against this guy. Here, all right, we'll play the clip. Monarchy versus democracy is the false straw man argument. We don't have a democracy, and nobody on the right is arguing for a monarchy. And so he's claiming that Trump is fascistic and king-like and so on. And none of that hits. What we care about is just a return to values. I think that's what's going on right now. And so those are some wins and some losses. Anyway, here's the video clip.
And the reason why we have a democracy is because we didn't want a king. And the kings came from the idea that their God said that they're the ones who's supposed to be king. And so we can disagree on this. I don't want to live in a country that is ruled by religious fundamentalism.
And if I do, you have no issue with that.
And no. And this is why I say under Trump, yes, you have won.
Yes.
You have a
Only
bunch
male
of Christian.
and female. You're right.
You have a Christian nationalist,
yes.
and
which is necessary.
And so I concede the point that under Trump, your Christian nationalism has gained an advantage under this.
Sorry, we're going to have more kids. We're going to have less abortions. We're going to have more family. We're going to have stable family households. Sorry about better education.
People, gay people should be outlawed.
They should be straight. They should be straight.
Women should be secondary to their husbands.
Women should submit to the husbands.
Women
that doesn't mean they are slaves.
Right,
it doesn't mean they are slaves. It means they are protected. Okay,
let me ask you
then. Let me ask you.
No.
Should women be drafted? Should women be drafted?
Listen, I think
if they're equal, should they be drafted?
I think this is the vision that you have, and I think Trump supports it.
Yes.
I think the Christian nationalists he has throughout his government are all going to work towards your vision.
Yes.
And my hope is that when people look at this, they say, hey, wait a second. I don't want my life to be dictated by the notion of a Christian nationalist prescription. Now, you may win out. I mean, certainly, like if you look at a country like Iran, they have a theocracy there, and apparently that's good for them if they want it.
My final point is whenever
I don't want to live in a theocracy.
My final point is whenever we see people live out Christian values to its full extent, we see a great society. When we see people deviate from that, that's where all the problems arise.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so he got cooked on this. No question about it in my mind. And even the easiest piece for me was when he said, I believe in democracy. But what he doesn't believe in is actually hearing somebody else say, well, I have a different view than you. Isn't that what democracy is about? A bunch of people come together democratically. The will of the people is that they get to make their voice heard. There are some dangerous things that are going on, but if you notice that he has to talk over him, he can't just sit there and say, okay, well, let's debate the merits of the point. No, he said, he's trying to prove the rule with the exception. The exception is that gay people and trans people and whatever else he's talking about are going to have the worst life. It's like, no, they've always existed. Have they had the worst lives? No. Why do people come here by the millions, the tens of millions? Why do 2.5 times the people come to the United States compared to any other country in the world? The evidence is overwhelming that people see what America looks like. So here's the cooking piece. This is the most coherent argument, and it's mean sounding. This woman basically owns the word xenophobic, which I actually sort of love. There's something about taking on the other side's verbiage and owning it. This is why you'll see people say, yes, I'm a Christian nationalist. That was meant as an insult to you, by the way. Okay. Christo-fascist is a thing I see thrown around on social media. I don't know what the hell that means. There's nothing fascistic about Christianity. In fact, all of it has to do with allowing your neighbor to do the best, to look at yourself and try to improve yourself. You know, we hear like just 2 Sundays, maybe 3 Sundays ago, there was the parable of removing the plank from your own eye, the beam that is in your own eye before you go to try to fix your neighbor. Christianity is a retrospective and saying, you know, I am unworthy of this thing, and yet I am going to do my best. And if you all did that in a society, if everybody basically looked inward and said, how do I improve myself? Then they would all be self-improving. Imagine that. You'd actually have something pretty good. This woman makes the argument about dominance, which is really important, I think, because like you all, I was raised to believe that America is a melting pot. And I want you to picture the pot as she's speaking. I'm going to prep your mind for this discussion. And maybe this is why it was so impactful for me, because I had not done it before. If you have a melting pot, it means that you are adding small ingredients to a much larger existing pot. The pot is already there. It is boiling. It is basically homogeneous, right? What the left would have you believe is that we actually have like stone soup, where there's 5 or 10 or 20 different stones. These are all the different cultures. And we throw them all in, and America is the water that goes between the stones. But the stones do not mix. But that's not what we have in America. That's not what made America great. What made this country great is that you melted in Italian culture to the point where when you think of spaghetti dinners, you think that is a pretty American thing. And American spaghetti is not Italian spaghetti. Just like our pizza is not Italian pizza. Just like, doesn't matter, you could go out and say, what do you want to get tonight? Do you want to get Chinese food? Do you want to get curry, or do you want to get tacos? And every one of those things sounds like a very American experience. What's more American than getting Taco Tuesday? Right? And yet, it comes from another culture. We've made it our own. Why? Because we melted it down into the dominant culture that is this pot, the melting pot. And so everybody gets to contribute an ingredient, but the ingredient comes in to a smooth soup. Not a stew that has chunks of different things in it that are all unique and distinctive. This woman makes the argument that if you don't acknowledge a dominant culture, if you're pissed off that Donald Trump happened to have an executive order stating that English is the American language, then you're doing the thing the left has done, and it's a loss. Because we've already lived in a certain way. As I said, the people that are at the top of the Democrat Party live the same way that the people at the top of the Republican ticket do. They all live, one man and one wife. Do they have affairs and all kinds of other problems? I'm sure they do. Sure, of course. But none of that says that like they wouldn't be able to go out there and openly say, by the way, I'm a polyamorous person and I'm raising my child in this sexually deviant way. People would go, you are not normal. That is not what Americans do. And so the quiet majority of this country that basically doesn't give a rat's about politics. All of you listening here are the weirdos, myself included. We're all a little weird. We've all been drawn into this because they've made us care about something that never used to matter to us, ever. I'm prepping this clip up enough. Like I said, this was really impactful for me listening to it. The woman's name is Sarah Stock. She goes as a journalist. She's got some great takes I've seen over on X now because I went looking into who she was. But listening to her speak, tell me that you don't understand the difference between stew and soup when she starts talking and why this guy gets destroyed by the argument. Because America has been a soup, a blended, smooth, homogeneous melting pot with a dominant culture. And the minute you try to act like it is not, you lose. And most Americans actually know that too.
What's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
To be xenophobic, yes. Nationalism is better.
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture. We should have assimilation.
Which, do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
What is
based
the dominant
on
culture?
European and Christian values and identity. That is the dominant culture.
White Christian,
it's rooted in European identity.
White. So your argument is that
has been the dominant culture.
Just to be clear.
And we're not letting.
Okay, just to be clear, he doesn't like this, and yet, how do you argue that there's not a dominant culture? Look at our rules. Look at how many state houses had the 10 Commandments out there. Why is it that when someone says, well, you shouldn't murder anyone, and you go, well, why? And they go, well, because it's bad. It's like, says who? Says who? From whence did you get your values? You can actually think that you are now post-Christianity, that you are living in a post-religious world. You can believe that. And you can try to operate that way. But if I asked you the questions and you were to go back and peel the layers, why is it that you think the things that you think? And this is the Socratic method we use on people on the left. When I talk to them, where did you decide what is good and bad? Why is it good for us to honor and to be respectful of people who think differently than us? Why? Why should it matter? Why should I not just smash them out of the way and say, I don't care? Why do you think that person has worth or value, even if they have a different opinion? Where does that come from? And if you ask these questions, they have to go back long enough to go, you go, okay, well, were you raised in a faith tradition? Well, my parents were, but I'm not. And what was it? And maybe it wasn't their parents. Maybe it was their parents' parents. But I guarantee you that almost everybody that you deal with in America that has more than 2 or 3 generations in this country has a Christian root, the vast majority. So when she says the dominant culture already exists, it already exists. It's not up for debate. It was established by the people who came here, and the people who came in and brought their own ideas to it. They either assimilated or they didn't. And if they didn't survive in the culture. To the point where non-Christians who get into public life still acknowledge God, and they say so in a very ambiguous way because they don't even want to get into the faith structure that they have. Kash Patel, for example, I'm fairly confident he was not raised Christian, and I don't believe that he goes to a Christian church. And yet, when you listen to him talk, he uses Christian terminology because it's the easiest thing for everyone to understand, and the values are shared. Same thing with the Tulsi Gabbard type. It doesn't matter who you look at. And by the way, there's some very non-Christian type actors when you look into the Trump administration. And yet, if you want to be accepted in our dominant culture, you don't have a choice. It's not debatable what has to be discussed. I'm going to let them continue to keep going.
People assimilate to that. We're saying you should keep your culture, and this is why our culture is so divided.
Your argument is that Trump is good for those who want a dominant white European culture.
I mean, that is what America is. It's rooted in European identity and Christian values. That's what it has been. Would you really disagree with that? What is it then, if that's not the identity of America?
Well, I think the identity of America...
For the majority of time, America's been a country. You don't think that's been the identity?
Well, actually, no. I think actually the identity of America has been, for better or for worse, a melting pot in that regard.
Yeah, maybe since like the 1960s. Even then, even we had this idea of a melting pot literally means assimilation too. It means melting. It means you're assimilating to the dominant culture. Is that not what melting means?
No, it doesn't
and
mean
now instead we're saying there's something wrong with xenophobia.
Culture. No. I mean, look, I got to be honest with you. You and I have a fundamental disagreement. We will never see eye to eye on this. It's a choice. And people, I think what you're expressing, though, is really what the Trump movement at its heart is about. And I think that's problematic.
I disagree. I don't think Trump's anywhere close to being a Christian nationalist. That's ridiculous. Trump's basically a Democrat from 15 years ago when it comes to social issues.
So you don't think that he's conservative enough for you?
Oh, definitely. Nowhere close. No.
He's not xenophobic enough for you?
No, he's trying to import a bunch of H-1Bs. Are you kidding?
Right. Oh, so you want to get them out too? Yeah. No, I think you're making my argument for me.
No. She's destroying you because you can't live in such a way as the way you described it. She just told you what the dominant culture was, and his answer was, I don't agree. It's been a melting pot. And she's like, yeah, exactly, a melting pot. In any case, the argument is actually made for you by looking at the graph of international, quote unquote, migrants and or immigration. And it has been like this for a very long time. The only disagreement I have is she said Donald Trump is a Democrat from 15 years ago. I would say from 30 years ago, but that's okay. I'm probably a little bit older than she is. This is the position I'm taking. And maybe that's a little bit spicy coming out of the gate. That's where we're going with. Let's break over and talk about my friends at Blackout Coffee. You guys asked how many cups of coffee. I'm on cup number, I think 3.5 now. That's what we're working with right now. If you guys want to start your day the way that we're starting it over here, I just cracked into a bag of Pitch Black, which is the espresso blend. I'm letting you know, if you want to change the way you start your day, Blackout Coffee. It's not just a coffee, it's a wake-up call. It's a rise and grind. Yes, we grind. Actually, we do it at night before, so we don't wake up the kids. You want to push harder. You want to never compromise on what you stand for. That's what we're all about here. It's not an average cup of joe. It's a bag of Blackout Coffee that's roasted with purpose. It's packed with bold flavor, and it is fueled by the kind of values that built this country. Oh, how about that? Perfect segue, right? Grit, determination, refusal to back down. They don't just make coffee, they're making a statement, and Blackout Coffee has been stepping up, adding more employees so they can get their stuff faster. That means they're growing because you continue to order. When you hit the order now button, you know your coffee is going to be coming fresh and ready to fuel your next move, powering through your daily grind, chasing down your big goals, or just refusing to settle for mediocrity, because Blackout Coffee's got your back. You don't have to just drink coffee. Drink Blackout. Go to blackoutcoffee.com. That's how you get there. /Kyle. Again, blackoutcoffee.com/Kyle. Use the promo code Kyle, Kyle. Save yourself 20% off your first order, and then set yourself up with a subscription. If you're going to have one daily thing that you just kind of treat yourself to, having good coffee is probably one of those things that's worth it. It adds a lot of value to your life. I never was a coffee drinker until I married my wife, so I credit her for it. You guys can check out blackoutcoffee.com/Kyle. That's it. Let's keep pushing forward. I don't know how else to say it. And now we're going to go into something that's a little bit more of a pivot here, because if you're going to divide people, you got to get them to believe in things that are not real. My reflection is, here's the various different COVID things. 5 years ago, the WHO declared a COVID pandemic. Here's a look at the disease numbers. So we have still people that are being hospitalized, and they're still tracking it. Who knew? It's not running like the death ticker that we used to see on CNN, but people are still dying from COVID, apparently, or being hospitalized, apparently, by the hundreds of thousands, apparently. There's another piece here. This is from NBC. COVID fractured American society. 5 years later, we still haven't healed. Do you want to know why I think we got fractured so aggressively? It's my belief that the fracture happened because people didn't have faith. They didn't have faith. And a lot of what COVID showed us, because they showed us who the targets were. Liquor stores, open. Pornography, open. Essential businesses, right? Churches, not open, not essential. The things that were actually guaranteed in your First Amendment and in your Second Amendment, the things we talk about here all the time, the things that were the most valuable to Americans, self-reliance, determination. How many gun stores were considered to be essential? It depended on the state. Some states knew better because they would have riots on their hands. For those of you that turned around and were like, oh my God, I've never owned a gun before, but I am now going to step into the American sphere and become someone who is reliant on my own two hands and be able to take my own safety, because the cops right now are hiding behind paper masks and they are scared. We saw tattoo parlors that were considered to be essential. We saw stores that were selling pot and other sorts of things that were just like, that's New Mexico's entire industry from what I can tell. New Mexico basically sells like pot and tattoos. I don't know why, but that seems to be the businesses that are on every single corner, or vaping stores. All of the vices were considered essential and none of the virtues. How does that happen? It happens when you take the people and you pull them away from a faith tradition, and you tell them that a faith tradition is in fact bigoted. The Canadians did it first, by the way. I'm still looking for the number. Can any of you tell me? We want to still send that letter. I don't know why this was funny, but I actually got a text message with this quote from a friend of mine who obviously watched yesterday's show. No context, by the way. He just said, I'd like to send a letter to Canada. I'm still looking for it. I'll play it again because I like it.
How much postage does it take to send a letter to Canada?
Who's it going to?
Canada. It says, Dear Canada, you.
Dear Canada, straight up. They did it first, did they not? They've been kind of a canary in the coal mine. We've seen the Brits do the same thing. They've divorced themselves from the traditions, from the Western ethos. And what's even crazier is this, because you remember, who were the big villains on January 6th? Who is the so-called deep state? Who have the administrative state really targeted and honed in on? Because Donald Trump was part of it, but there were people behind that movement. One of them were the Oath Keepers. We had Stuart Rhodes on this program on purpose, by the way. It's not an accident that I had that guy come on and speak to us, because he's not a villain and he's not a cartoon, bad guy. He's a man that actually really believes in his oath. And he was educated in the way that the left would tell you is most important. He went to what? Yale Law School? So the Oath Keepers are problematic. These are people that are veterans, that are first responders, that are law enforcement, that believe in the oath. The oath is a loyalty to a higher purpose. It's that Constitution. The Constitution exists in order to protect our rights given by God from the government. That is the entirety of what our Constitution does. That's the Bill of Rights part of it, at least. That's the part that you're really swearing allegiance to most of the time. That you will not violate the sacred trust that the government places in you with government authority. You have to stay out of the arena of the individual. That's what we think. And then it's an organization for saying, here's the limited role that government is allowed to play. And this is what it does. There are some people in Congress that actually understand what the Constitution is and what it does and understand history and are brighter than basically all the people around them. And Tom Massey is one of them. For some reason, and I don't know the reason, but Donald Trump has decided to take a stab at him. And he said he should be primaried. This is a terrible, terrible idea. Tom Massey has also survived this. He did it in 2020 at the end of Donald Trump's first term, where he said, somebody should get rid of Massey. It doesn't work. I'm going to read you Donald Trump's Truth Social post. That's the way that we have to find it here. He's talking about the House Freedom Caucus. Right now, we're talking about a potential government shutdown. The deadline is March 14th. You know my position on government shutdowns. I don't care. Bring it on. They always get resolved in the long run, but oftentimes it allows us to have an interesting and important conversation about what's going on with that shutdown. And maybe we should have some real serious Doge cuts built in. Got a clip from Tim Burchett talking about that. Tennessee congressman who says some pretty reasonable things too. Here's Donald Trump saying, this is what you can't read on the small piece of the screen. Thank you for the House Freedom Caucus for delivering a big blow to the radical left Democrats, their desire to raise taxes and shut down our country. Those are not the same thing, by the way. Raising taxes and shutting down the country. Shutting down the country means that we don't spend any money. That's fine. They hate America and all it stands for. I do agree with that. That's why they've allowed millions of criminals to invade our nation. Again, why do the criminals come here? Why do people want to come to America? Because it's great. It takes great courage to do the right thing. Then he makes the stupid pivot to go after Tom Massey. And this is a bad decision. It is bad energy to turn against the people who are the most constitutional and principled. Congressman Thomas Massey of beautiful Kentucky is an automatic no vote on just about everything, despite the fact that he's always voted for continuing resolutions in the past. He should be primaried, and I will lead the charge against him. He's just another grandstander who's too much trouble and not worth the fight. He reminds me of Liz Cheney and her historic record. No to all of that, Mr. Trump. That's not right. What Tom Massey has always done is that he pushes against and he gets some concessions because there's always going to be a continuing resolution. But if he can be someone who can sit out and actually push us further to the right, he does it every single time. And he probably will eventually vote for things. That's just how it works. But he's principled. He's a decent person and he's intelligent. And for all the people out there saying, I had someone that came into my follows or was saying it on X. They were like, Thomas Massey's a retard. The guy graduated from MIT with a bachelor's and a master's when it meant something. He was also on Junkyard Wars. Do you guys know that? He was on Junkyard Wars. This was one of my favorite shows when I was a kid. They used to build scrap. There's nothing more like kind of amusingly American than building stuff from scrap. They would go into a junkyard, they would grab a bunch of stuff, and they would have some competition, and they would just like make it. They would make something work. He's awesome for that. And he has all these great stories about it. Tom Massey is one of my all-time favorite congressmen because he's actually intelligent. And in the eve of him losing his wife and still being a principled guy and still showing up into public life, someone who made money before he ever got into politics and now still works and has his own cattle ranch and all the kind of good things about that. What are we doing? We're going to pick a fight with Tom Massey? How about you pick a fight with someone like Speaker Johnson? Mike Johnson has been weak from the beginning. People said, Massey sided with Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is a great governor. Say otherwise. I challenge you to say that. What are we talking about? And then they said, he was backing Kevin McCarthy. Tell me a major difference between Kevin McCarthy and Speaker Johnson. I'd like to know one because I haven't seen it and I watch it professionally. That's what I do right now. I don't see a difference. They're the same. We were promised single issue spending bills, that Congress would take its job seriously to write up funding for each individual agency or priority, and they never did it. So what's the difference? So he's right. Johnson, no better. McCarthy, that was a waste of time. All of that was theatrics, which we said at the time. If you guys listen here, we had several episodes called No One for Speaker, and the argument was like that. Politics is about getting leverage, and if Massey has leverage to get things to move further to the right the way that he thinks it should be, and he represents his constituency, he runs unopposed because no one wants to run against him because they're going to get dominated. I've had several dozen of his constituents say the same thing. They popped in on social media the minute you share it. This is a wasted resource. And the other thing is, it's going to be over in 24 hours. Let's be real about that too. It will disappear. I have no doubt in my mind that it will be absolutely out of here. Because it just doesn't have any staying power. This is like Trump popping off, so we can ignore that. But Trump is allowed to pop off. Why? Because people believe in our Constitution. They believe that you have a right to free speech. And then those ideas get sussed out. He shouldn't be censored the way that he was after January 6th. In the same way, when I make the argument that West is best, do you know one group of people that actually made that argument? West is best. It's the entire foundation of who they are and what they are. They're called the Proud Boys. Oath keepers have one piece: do the right thing, obey the Constitution. That oath never ends. Proud Boys had one thing: the West is best, and we will fight people who think otherwise. Our society, which, whether you want to call it a Christian nationalist or whether you want to call it simply Western values, they're the same thing. If you take it back, there's basically two things that form the American experiment. Part one is Christian values. The other piece is like sort of the lessons taught from government out of Rome and out of Greece. Classical antiquity. That's it. Those are the two things. You put them together into a love child with brilliant elitists who had money in the 1770s, 1750s onward to 1790s. That's what you get. You get one real simple thing: the American Constitution and our current system of government. Straightforward. This is not a good fight. It's not a good fight to have for Trump. It's a waste of effort. It's, you can pick fights with Canada all day long. You got my back. You want to tell me you want to annex Greenland? I think it's hilarious. You want to say you want to take over the Panama Canal? You want to put tariffs on everybody and tank the economy for a little bit? Yeah, short term. Austerity measures, all of that. I'm on board. Yeah, but you don't get to pick a fight like that. This is a stupid fight. It's a waste of your time. All right. Speaking about a fight that's worth having, there is one. You may not be able to win it outright, but you can continue to fight it forever, and you probably should. It's a battle for your privacy and for your personal protection online. We all live online. You're probably watching this somewhere online. There's no other way to get it. So I'm going to tell you, you can protect yourself with patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Patriot Protect, there are folks that have basically identified the problem is you got places like Newsweek, you've got other major news organizations showing data breaches as recently as this February, putting millions of Americans at risk. These data breaches will include background checks. They go undetected for months, oftentimes, and then suddenly the government comes and acknowledges it, or some large company does, and now you have cyber criminals and people that are trying to exploit you, getting your personal information without your knowledge, including full names, social security numbers, home addresses, phone numbers, drug test results, and so on. They circulate around the dark web to the highest bidder. It's worse than leaking a password. This is actually someone who's going to be able to go out there and impersonate you. So what do? You find a service that's going to be able to back you up and stop the leak from where it's at. They have to be removed from all of these different data brokers. So what does Patriot Protect have? They've got two different protocols. One is called the Blackout service. It goes deeper and scans the dark web. The other one is called the Search and Destroy protocol. We're using them over here at the Seraphin house. My wife has it as well now. So we've got them all set up. And one thing that you notice is you get less robocalls. That's the biggest piece. These data brokers, they're scammers and criminals and stuff. They're going to go basically troll the web, either buy your information or whatever else. They will try to use it to impersonate you, set up fake credit, steal your house, all this other kind of crazy stuff. If you guys want to stop it at the source, you can save 15% on the annual service by going to patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Does it really work? As far as I can tell, you're actually trying to prove a negative with things like this. But what I can tell you is that my personal experience is far less robocalls. I've got this phone that sits here on my desk. This is my work phone, and I don't give the number out. I used to get calls on it basically 10 times a day while I was working. It would just buzz, and I would have no idea. It would always scam calls. I get less and less and less of those since we've been doing this. I've been doing it for maybe 2.5 months at this point. So check them out. Again, patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Save yourself 15% on an annual subscription if you guys want to do that. Let's push in. COVID stuff. Here's another story, by the way. This is ABC. We still don't know who spread COVID, where it came from, all these other kind of things. They're still out there. I don't know why they're bringing it up unless it's just a slow news day. It's not clear to me whether it was a lab leak, but they're literally talking about whether it was a lab leak or not, even though those of us who were paying attention knew this right away. This is the reason why censorship is so dangerous. This is the reason why Donald Trump should not be censored, which he was. So the sad thing is given to his own devices and not pushed back. Again, Donald Trump, not a conservative. Democrat from 30 years ago, I'll buy that. He's doing something that is really kind of dangerous right now. And this is why having a decent political opposition where people can agree on American values, where we're not having these stupid debates on whether we have a democracy or a Christo-fascist monarchy or whatever the hell else he's like this guy Sam Sater is arguing. The reason why you need a functional opposition is that people can keep each other in check, left and right. And it should all be on the same road, going to the same place. Here's an example of where it's really dangerous. This is probably the worst story that's come out since Donald Trump has taken office. He's bragging about ICE arresting a legal immigrant for bad speech. That's, of course, phrased by the folks over at MSNBC. And you know what? I actually agree with them. Occasionally, the people on the political left actually hold up to the principle. Now, they have bad intentions, I think, but they actually are saying something that is really important. Do they think that you should be able to speak, that the Proud Boys should be able to speak? No, but I do. And so I'm consistent, and I will be consistent. Donald Trump bragging about ICE arresting a guy named Mahmoud Khalid is a horrific idea. Let's read the story on this. He's a prominent student activist leader at Columbia University, part of the pro-Palestine protests last year. I turned down a Fox News hit over this stuff. I'll tell you about that in a second. On Saturday, he was taken into a detention facility by Immigrations and Customs Enforcement agents, according to the AP. His attorney says that she spoke to one of the agents over there and was told that Khalid's student visa was being revoked. The problem is that he had a green card, and they said that too is being revoked. Why? Because they think he was being anti-Semitic? It turns out that ability to say things that are bad in this country, and bad is something that the government is going to tell you. It is not a good position for the government to be adjudicating what is good and bad and appropriate speech. Because what happens when the other team gets in and your Christian ideology, you're going to mass on Sunday. You're going to hear a preacher or a pastor at the pulpit getting up and speaking and telling you that you should be following the biblical law, that you should be listening to the commandments of Jesus, that you should be listening to the Beatitudes. When they say blessed is the meek, and then they're going to say, well, that's hate speech because it's favoring the meek and the Christians and things that we don't like. Is that okay? That's where this leads. If you can't see where it leads to a pendulum, a ping pong ball of knocking back and forth who gets to judge what is bad speech. The left already did that. The entire point of Donald Trump signing an EO about weaponization, about what we were hoping a Pam Bondi would get into, and no idea whether that's going to happen or not. What we were hoping Kash Patel is going to get involved in. Doesn't seem like that's happening there either, but I'm given till the 14th when Bongino shows up. Maybe they can get some initiative and some movement. My friends in the Bureau are saying it's not going the way it needs to. You can't do that. You can't criminalize speech. And you can't have the government be the arbiter of it. It is dangerous and stupid. Because eventually the other team holds on to all the cards. You don't let the government become the arbiter. That's the reason. When you're dealing in things like the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, which is something I've dealt with, they basically assume that if you say you have a religious belief, you guys are familiar with the term Pastafarian? It's the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Do we know about this? Hold on, let me throw it on the chat here. Chat, do you know about Pastafarians? Do you know about the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster? Because it's briefed in every single con law First Amendment class that you ever go to, the entry level stuff in law enforcement or otherwise. The Pastafarians essentially say that they believe that there is an almighty God and the God is the flying spaghetti monster. It's this made up thing. It's a farce to be able to point out. It's a First Amendment device to be able to push back in church. And what the churches and sorry, not the churches, what the courts have said is they don't want to be the arbiter of what's a real religion and what's not. That's not their job. They don't want to do it. So what they do is they operate from a place that they assume that your religion is true, that your belief is in good faith and sincere. And once that happens, they can basically decide whether or not there is a reason to accommodate you, but not based on whether your belief is real. They just decide whether or not the company can be inconvenienced and they have to accommodate you. What we found during the COVID crisis and the insanity that came in, all that tyranny, is that they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to accommodate anybody, mostly Christians, it turns out. But if they had been Pastafarians who said we don't want to get a shot because we believe in pro-life stuff too, because the flying spaghetti monster also loves babies that are unborn, they would have had an equally reasonable claim. They would have been equally discriminated against. It just turns out that was not the case. It's truly important for the government not to weigh in on what is and what is not good speech. Revoking somebody's legal immigration status, somebody who's like saying things we don't like, that is an American thing. There are members of Congress that do it every day. And just because you would like that, when would they start coming after the immigrants that you do like? Because we don't really have a problem with people immigrating here and assimilating in to the soup that is America. We have a problem with people that come in and don't take on that value. And they become like stones, that they become like the stew where they're a chunk of meat, but they won't go ahead and be part of it. They won't get blended up. You should at least consider that this is a terrible, terrible plan. If you think that the government regulating speech is good, I challenge you to post in the comments for me an example of when it has worked out well. You can take it back to the 19 teens. Let me stand on principle and say this. The organization I used to work for, the FBI, used to go and raid communists. Now, I don't have any love for communism, and I don't have any love for people who espouse communism. And yet, as an American who actually believes in that oath, who does believe that the West is best, who does believe that we are supposed to love our neighbors and supposed to look around and try to influence them by our own great example, by getting rid of the beam in our own eye and not the speck in theirs, my goal is not to go out there and tell them dramatically they're wrong. It is to ask them why they think they are right and let them prove to themselves that they're not, because they can't live by the values they're saying. And as someone who believes in that oath, those of us that remember it, the entire point of it, the thing that makes you so proud to serve and used to be an American value, was that I may disagree with you, but I will defend to my death your right to say it. So how are we going to do this? How are you going to have that position and start kicking people out of the country and pulling their green card because they're espousing a terrorist ideology? Here's the Fox News situation. I had Fox News call me up. It was Jesse Waters' program, and they asked me to come on. This is about a year ago. This is right when those summer protests all around Columbia University, probably led by this guy, were going on. And they said, we'd like you to come on and talk about the danger of the FBI investigating pro-life Christians and Catholics, going after Mark Houck, going after and recruiting sources in the Richmond church. We want to talk about that, but they're not going out and investigating and arresting pro-Hamas professors at Harvard and pulling their money. And I said, you got the wrong guy. I don't think the government should investigate anybody over speech. They shouldn't even know what this guy's immigration status is. Do you want to know why? Because the investigation should never start. It shouldn't start. It's the entirety of what I do here, telling you that intelligence investigations with no allegation of criminality, if there is no allegation of criminality, there is no reason to start the investigation. It is a First Amendment protected activity. And that holds for almost every J6 investigation that was kicked off. I saw hundreds of allegations for January 6th, hundreds of them. And that's not an exaggeration. That is a specific, I saw hundreds of those cases pop up. And when they came in through the hopper, they looked like someone saying, this person has speech that I don't like. Go investigate them. And my answer was, the only allegation here is a First Amendment protected activity. There's no allegation or information that federal crime took place. Therefore, we cannot carry on this. You don't want to be in a game of batting around the ball of who has the power. And when that person has the power, they're going to destroy stuff. And it comes from a historically ignorant point of view, because all you have to do is know that the minute you leave that open for people, they will use it. And if you normalize it, we've already seen it happen. The government gets to play winner and losers. You know another game they played in? The security clearance game. Have you guys seen that? This is another piece of it. This is ABC News reporting here. I think ABC. Let me make sure I get that right. I don't want to miscredit the article. Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah, no, this is ABC News. I can usually recognize by the headline font, for whatever that's worth, folks. If you're listening, you don't know it, but when I throw the screen up, I can actually see the color, and I go, oh, white is either CBS or usually it's ABC. Biden's intelligence access to daily presidential briefings have been revoked, says DNI Tulsi Gabbard. That's good. Tulsi Gabbard, not a Christian as far as I can tell, still allowed to talk, still allowed in this administration. So far, seems like she's put her nose down and getting to work. Other Biden administration officials and lawyers have had their security clearances officially revoked. There's a little bit of a discussion about that. Here's Stephen Miller talking about having scrutiny on security clearances. I'm 100% behind this because the government likes to play favorites. They pulled my security clearance because they didn't like the way that I thought. How about if you don't have a need to know, which means you don't work in government anymore and you don't have a position of public trust, then we pull it out. And then we're consistent. This is what it should be. It shouldn't be about politics. By the way, Joe Biden tends to agree with this too. We'll play a little clip of that. Here's Stephen Miller making the argument, totally reasonable.
Well, the president not only cut off the security clearances to Perkins Coie and also implemented national security-related restrictions on access to government buildings, but also ordered a full review, audit, and, where necessary, based on the facts, termination of all government business and contracting as well to Perkins Coie. And that's going to be based, again, on an analysis and an assessment of those facts, because we are not going to fund the weaponization of law enforcement in America anymore. This is all a part of President Trump's plan to shut down weaponized law enforcement. Perkins Coie, as has been well documented and established, was at the center of the Russia collusion hoax. There was a multi-year war on American democracy, a giant psyop attempted on the American people that formed the justification for the incarceration, harassment, and spying on of countless American citizens, and of course the attempt to infiltrate President Trump's campaign and ultimately to try to launch a coup to throw him out of office.
All of that is correct. All of that is the reason why you can't do this. And when you see that, it's also the reason why you have to defend free speech, including when your own team is going to try to get rid of people. Donald Trump is not a conservative. He's a populist. That's my argument to you. I think that there's plenty of evidence for it. We've made the argument on this show many times. That doesn't mean I don't like what he's doing. It means that when he's doing it wrong, that we push back and we say, hey, that's not what we want. That's not what we wanted of you. You represent us. Please do it better in this particular sphere. Like when he says, hey, there's going to be a big, beautiful FBI headquarters building. How many of you want that? Not me. So I'm going to say it verbally. And I don't care if I don't have to agree with Donald Trump because he said it. I say, no, I think I know a little bit more about the FBI. Why? Because I worked there. You worked on a lot of things. Donald Trump has broad knowledge. I have deep knowledge. My deep knowledge says no new FBI headquarters. So I'll push back on it. Very easy. I haven't heard him talk about it since, by the way. So there's something valuable in that. You haven't heard a lot of noise about the FBI headquarters getting put in. They should move it to Huntsville, Alabama. We already built it. We already spent $2 billion there. That would be much better. That would be a very Doge thing to do, which is a good principle. It's also a good idea to pull security clearances because security clearances are aggressively used to act like I have some special knowledge. Think Adam Schiff in this case. I have some special knowledge. I'm read in on a program that you're not. I know things that you're not allowed to know. And because of that, I'm able to say things that you cannot refute. Pull it from all of them. But as Americans, we need to be able to say, hey, that's wrong. We don't agree with you. You can argue to your credentials and you can argue to authority, but we don't have to accept that because as Americans, we actually believe that all people have value, innate value, even the dumb ones, especially the dumb ones for some reason. A lot of dumb people get a lot of talking points. So if we're going to do this stuff, we need to pull security clearances. I'm 100% behind it. And by the way, Joe Biden was too. Remember, he pulled security clearances. This is not tit for tat. This is saying there's a weapon that is used and it is called credibility, and it is credibility granted by the U.S. government. Biden actually made the ultimate argument. You don't have any need for it. That's one of the three things you need in order to have a security clearance is a need to know. And if you're no longer the president and you're 1,000 years old, and by the way, you've been accused of all kinds of like financial dealings, selling access to secrets, maybe you don't need it. Here's Joe Biden saying the same thing.
Let me ask you then something that you do have oversight of as president. Should former President Trump still receive intelligence briefings?
I think not.
Why not?
Because of his erratic behavior unrelated to the insurrection.
I mean, you've called him an existential threat. You've called him dangerous. You've called him reckless.
Yeah, I have, and I believe it.
What's your worst fear if he continues to get these intelligence briefings?
I'd rather not speculate out loud. I just think that there is no need for him to have that intelligence briefing. What value is giving him an intelligence briefing? What impact does he have at all other than...
That's the same story. No impact at all. Two people that don't have any impact and have no need to be read in. Barack Obama, well, let's call it three. Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Joe Biden, no longer needed. And all the other people, the 51 spies who lies, that's not their job anymore. They don't work for this administration. No need. You can always reapply later. That would be good. Here's a little argument. We're going to kind of end up with three pieces here. I want to end with Michelle Obama is irrelevant, even though the argument has been made that she is. She doesn't need to be read in. She doesn't need to know this stuff. I think I've got that clip. Maybe I don't. Oh, there it is. Yeah, number 14. All right. So Michelle Obama being irrelevant, that's part one. We're going to go to Tom Massey. For all of you who want to get mad at him, I want you to remember he was the only person that stood up and said that our republic, using the proper words, will die at the altar of unanimous consent because nobody has the courage to stand up against it when they were talking about doing COVID funding nonsense. He was the lone voice that saw the danger there. He's a very principled person, and I would have also loved that. And then lastly, we'll end with something that's vaguely racist and sort of hilarious because we always do a little bit of a funny thing at the end. Here we go. Michelle Obama first. Scott Jennings making the argument. The same guy who said his dad who loves Donald Trump now, used to be a Bill Clinton guy. I think that argument still makes me think Scott Jennings is very reasonable.
Another lifestyle podcast.
She can't stay out of it. She can't just
stay out of it.
She's making money and having fun.
We all are sort of all, it's like programmed to talk about how great she is and how smart she is. I mean, she campaigned a lot for Kamala Harris. She was a key speaker of the Democratic National Convention. Barack Obama was a key strategist for this whole thing that happened last year. And yet somehow Donald Trump still won. So I'm rethinking the premise of that she's the answer to the future, or that any politician is the answer to Democratic Party.
She's not a politician.
She's so good that Melania Trump stole her speech.
I'm sorry, what?
She's so good that Melania Trump plagiarized her speech, or do you not remember?
And you like
at the Republican convention.
Scott, you like Michelle Obama?
Yeah, I think she's fine, but just after the I thought she gave a wonderful speech as far as convention speeches go. I'm just looking at what happened last fall. The Obamas helped engineer Biden's ouster. They put in Harris. They ran the campaign. She campaigned for him, and it was a total failure. I'm just wondering how good they really are.
It's really funny. Also, that was Anna Navarro, who supposedly is a Republican. These are the kind of squishy, nasty people that you end up seeing out there. At the end of the day, I will make the argument that here's the Tom Massey that we all see, and the reason that you push against the CR is because you're trying to get the CR to have less crap in it. The CR is a coverall. It is a pulling a rug over the American people, saying, "Oh, well, we had to extend things, and we added all this crap in there." He goes and he pushes against crap all the time. That's just what he does. That's the nature of who Tom Massey is, and he'll stand up and be the only one. He said something that all of you should also consider. Politicians boo him. People that are populist boo him. Why do they do that? And why does he not care? Because he's seen what they cheer for. And they cheer for giving out a bunch of money and shutting down the U.S. economy. He saw that during the COVID stuff. Again, I think he's highly principled. It's my fave.
Mr. Speaker, I came here to make sure our republic doesn't die by unanimous consent in an empty chamber, and I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise and remain standing until counted. An insufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is refused.
Mr. Speaker.
Is the gentleman recognized?
I object on the basis that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
The chair will count for a quorum. Counted for a quorum is present. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Section 7B of House Resolution 891, the House stands adjourned until 3 p.m. on Tuesday, March 31st, 2020.
That was 5 years ago. That was during the COVID nonsense. You saw how sparsely populated it was. There was probably not a quorum there. That's been the argument made. They said that they did it. They shoved through a bunch of funding under the CARES Act to try to get a bunch of money into people's hands to buy off votes. And at the end of the day, there's nothing conservative about that. And there's also nothing that was actually right. It skipped all the rules because we threw it all out the window. America got a second chance. The fact that we're still standing here, the fact that you have a second Donald Trump term is a great indication that things can work. But you have to also know that there are principles at play, and you can't just go with whims. So when your leaders say things that you don't agree with, you don't have to follow them. You don't have to agree with them. It's not your job. Their job is to actually agree with you. If enough of you say something, then something happens. And you don't have to agree with me either, by the way. You can disagree. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But bring arguments. Don't bring feelings. My argument is that Tom Massey is principled. And here's a little funny thing from Tom Massey from a long time ago. If you don't know what Junkyard Wars was, this is a little snippet from there. It was a show where he ran around. Look how young he was back then. He was a reality TV star even before Donald Trump was.
No.
Hey, do you let it go?
I didn't mean to squeeze it.
You're not allowed in our attended build area.
How about we work out a deal? Since you're the captain, we can negotiate something here.
You guys haven't done a whole heck of a good scrounging job. I don't see a lot to say.
Hey, Captain, at the moment, we have the aces of the game here.
Okay. Yeah, okay. You got one up on us.
You gotta talk to the captain here. This is the captain here. We can work out a deal here.
The captain's escaped the mayhem to negotiate. Tom must face up to fast-talking Frank if he's to claw back anything.
Fantastic. When you left the treasure open, it was an opportunity for us to capitalize on it. Hopefully your men can understand that this is warfare.
Gosh, you guys are junkyard dogs.
We're going to get...
Have you ever seen that? If you've never seen Junkyard Wars, it was one of my favorites when I was a kid. They'd go build like BattleBot machines and like high-speed, whatever, racing mobiles that would fall apart while they were doing them. They're all wearing those silly costumes. Anyway, Tom Massey, super bright guy, principled guy. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just telling you. I think he's cool. I'm with Tom Massey on this one. I'm with Trump on a bunch of stuff he's been doing. I've been very excited about a lot of the things he's been doing. Not this. Don't call out Tom Massey. That's a loss. And it also is not going to result in a primary loss for him. He ran uncontested the last time. The last time they tried to run him was after he stood up against the CARES Act, and he dominated there again. That's why he's still in office. So we'll lose that. All right, should we end with something kind of fun, a little bit lighthearted, because we've been kind of going heavy? How about this guy named Hans Kim? He's a comedian. He is what American comedians used to be, irreverent, said things that people thought might be true but wouldn't want to say out loud because they would get destroyed. Comedians used to say mean things to be able to prove a point. Here he is talking about what's the most conservative thing. Apparently being racist is conservative. This is the take. It's kind of funny. All of us will laugh. And this is actually the same comedian. This is Kill Tony, who was actually roasted for doing his thing. He's a roast comedian. That's what he does. He offends people, and he was at that Madison Square Garden rally that they referred to Donald Trump as a Nazi for having. Here we go. Let's end with this. Top 3 most conservative racist beliefs held, I guess.
What's the most conservative thing about you?
I hate certain minorities.
Whoa! Okay.
What's your top 3 minorities that you hate?
Starting with number 3.
Sri Lankans.
We were really concerned you might just drop the N-word right from the top there. Right from the number 3 position. Then number 2, least favorite group of immigrants to Hans Kim.
Native Americans.
Why?
They're poor and dirty.
Not wrong.
Oh, yes.
In my experience.
There's 1 to go, everybody. The number 1 least favorite minority group, according to Hans Kim, is...
the blacks.
There's nothing good about any of that, but it's freaking hilarious. And also, he just does it because that's his shtick. If you guys are following us on Rumble, make sure you give us a thumbs up. If you're following us over on YouTube, same story. If you're on X, give us a like. We appreciate that. Subscribe wherever you're at. KyleSeraphin.com if you want to see the articles referenced from today. I always put them up there for free. If you want to be part of the community, you can do so as well as a paid subscriber. Appreciate all of you that have done that. It's awesome. And you get access to our Sunday sit-downs like a day early with none of the advertisements, none of the other nonsense. You can just download it right away. You don't have to wait for it. So you get those on Saturday if you like. I'm going to start actually releasing them earlier on Saturday. And lastly, Spotify. Join it over there. If you're listening on Apple, if you're listening on iHeartRadio or any of the other kind of big platforms, Spotify is superior for us. It also gives you video, so you have the access to either watch it or listen to it. You can put it up on your screen while you're driving and distract yourself with my face on there talking and flipping up, and you can see the headlines if you like. You don't have any of the pop-up ads, so check us on Spotify. That's it. Really appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday, this March 11th. Kind of a long editorial version of the Kyle Seraphin show today, but it seemed like something that needed to be discussed. You guys let me know what you think about those positions in the comments. I'm interested in reading your pushback or your agreement. Either way, both of them are good. Thanks so much. See you again. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.